so spooky.
He's so spooky and whimsical there at the end.
Whimsical, yeah. I need to decide on whether or not we're gonna go with that pseudo Burton stuff or go for something more. I wanted old timey, right? I like old timey horror movies. But anyway, welcome to the Spooky Time Club. Here is Rebecca Frost with a completely improvised Spooky Time Club intro.
Okay, you are driving in a car and your cell phone rings. Don't answer it, you're driving. It's Spooky Time Club.
Definitely worth the price of admission. There you go, folks. There you go. Total satisfaction on the Spooky Time Club or your money back.
You get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for. Absolutely. Which means our Patreon subscribers right now are really evaluating some things.
That was $3.50 worth of intro.
It really was. It really was. I think it was. All right, Spooky Time Club. Every Thursday we get together and we talk about spooky movies. So what have we covered so far?
So we did The Black Phone and In the Tall Grass. And
Good
then
movies.
Last week we did last week we did
Old and Sandcastle.
Old and Sandcastle. Sorry. My dog stole a cat treat off my desk and I hit my light.
I thought you had opened the Ark of the Covenant there with the way your face flashed white for a second. All right, so.
So sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Stole a cat toy.
I get it. You got to keep those dogs in line when they're stealing cat toys. All right,
so you were in charge this week.
Yes, and I went with something old and something new because someone somewhere is getting married. So
I'm really glad you did though, because this is again one of those situations where I really like adaptations, and I guess a remake is kind of an adaptation.
It very much is,
and especially considering this property in particular. I mean, I don't believe it's based on a book. I don't believe it's based on anything. Just a man named Tom Holland.
And his love of 1950s horror movies.
Yeah. Very prevalent in the first movie, which is 1985's Fright Night.
Right. And one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite horror movies because it handles a tricky combination of things. It handles horror. It handles like some pretty graphic violence and comedy, which is a rough thing to juggle. And there wasn't a lot of that going on. Like in the 80s, we had things like Killer Clowns from Outer Space where they were intentionally going over the top. You had some other things like Psycho 2, also written by Tom Holland, that had a little bit of humor in between the murdering. But this movie basically handled a lot of kind of eternal themes. I'm recognizing with the remake from 2011, the eternal themes of horny teenagers.
Yeah.
Vampires.
You cannot make a horror movie without some horny teenagers. There were boobs so early on in this movie. I was so shocked.
The first one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which by 80s horror movie standards was pretty tame because usually in an 80s horror movie, it's like every 7 to 10 minutes.
Oh.
So, it was written in the handbook. If you were writing a slasher movie or a horror movie in the 80s, you just had to have somebody running around naked. A lot. So
and when I pulled it up to watch it, I noticed it was rated R, and I was like, "Well, that's funny," because like Jaws wasn't rated R. Jaws was rated PG.
I would rethink that rating after that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That redheaded kid on his raft is an R rating on his own.
Yeah, absolutely. But then I was like, why is this movie rated R? That seems kind of bizarre. And then boobs, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But then also a lot of stuff later on in the movie.
Yeah, and what I love about the original Fright Night, I mean, okay, premise, Charlie Brewster is a horny teenage boy played by a 30-year-old man. Who is dating his girlfriend, Amy, who is a teenage girl played by a 27-year-old woman.
And the most annoying girl in the world, I'll say it.
Amanda, she's, let me double check. Amanda Bierce from Married with Children.
Who is she on Married with Children?
She was the annoying next door neighbor.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it's very, very annoying. But it's really hard because she's playing like a 16-year-old girl, and she's clearly 12 years older than that. And no amount of pastel rompers and big ribbons in your hair is going to change that. But you also have like one of the great, in my opinion, homages to horror movies, which is the character of Peter Vincent, played by Roddy McDowall, who I just found out was only like 4 years older than I am right now when he made this.
Oh. There's still time.
He seemed so old. But Charlie becomes convinced that his next door neighbor, Jerry Dandridge, is a vampire. Because
have you seen him?
Have you seen him?
There was a shot of his hands, and you see like his very manicured talons, and I was like, oh, no woman is lucky to be with him.
No. No. Oh my gosh. But Chris Sarandon, who most of you probably know from Princess Bride, is you didn't see Princess Bride?
I have not, and it's become a sticking point now where I won't.
Okay, that's fine. So if for everybody except Rebecca, you will know him as Prince Humperdinck from The Princess Bride. He's quite charming in that, and he's also I believe the kids would call him a son of a bitch. He plays the asshole character very well, but in this he's like charismatic and smarmy, and local prostitutes are disappearing, and poor Charlie's convinced. Well, he's actually knows because Jerry kills one of the locals in his window and then trashes his car. So he goes to Peter Vincent, vampire hunter.
Because he saw him on the TV, and he's the master of the mystic arts or whatever.
Did you ever see stuff like that when you were growing up? Because, I mean, this is where we get into that generational divide.
Yeah, no. The most I ever saw, the most I ever watched was, like, Tales from the Crypt, honestly.
Did you ever, like, see Elvira and stuff like that?
I was aware of Elvira, but, like, I am not familiar with the... Yeah, baby. I'm not familiar with that era of like horror television.
It was great. Like here, even in Salt Lake City, what became Channel 13 at the time was Channel 20, and they had Chiller Theater, and it sometimes had a host, sometimes didn't. Late night movies, like if they could get something that was public domain for nothing, they would get that and host it. And a lot of times, like there's some really, really goofy stuff around the country that was hosted. That's how Elvira got started, is basically hosting Chiller Theater type stuff in LA. But yeah, Peter Vincent was not an unknown thing, but it was dying in the 80s. People weren't watching the horror movies or the schlockula stuff that was going in. I mean, this is pure Rob Zombie stuff, right?
Well, and the opening of this movie, it starts. So I'm not gonna lie, like anything before 1995, I'm really like, ugh, why?
Sure.
But this movie in particular, like the opening scene, it opens with like, what is like this conversation between a man and a woman, and she's like, oh, it's so dark out, and he's like, wow, your lips look so red and luscious, and then there's like a twist of like she's a vampire, but then it turns out that they're watching a horror movie. I'm so sorry, I have to let this dog out.
Okay, you're fine. He doesn't want to hear about Spooky Time Club.
He's like, I'm just so glad you're home.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, like I was saying, the film, like it opens with what you think is, because going in, I knew it was about vampires, and so
right.
I assume this is an exchange between characters in the movie, but then it shows you, oh no, they're just watching horror movies, and it sets the scene of like, oh yeah, this kid, he's a horror boy.
He's a horny horror boy.
Yeah.
And they set up another thing that was so great, is the first introduction you get to Peter Vincent is in one of his old Hammer horror movie style pictures where he comes in to kill the vampire and the stake is backwards.
No.
when he comes in, because he's like, ah, and yeah, his stake is backwards, and then he gets like the ketchup pump in the face graphically. And that stuff was so prevalent. Like if you grew up during the period of time that I grew up, or even my dad's generation, there was so much of that on TV because it was cheap and it was free. And so you get this movie. What did you think? I mean, it's older than I think you're usually like going with.
Yeah, 1985. It was definitely before my time. I will admit I was quite distracted while I was watching it. Because rule of thumb, I'm just gonna get distracted if I watch an old movie. Just because I find that they're so slow moving.
Yeah, we've sped up our cuts and everything else.
Yeah, and it's not the movie's fault. I'm just a product of my generation.
Sure.
And but I found myself quite surprised how much I did enjoy it. Amy drove me nuts.
She's annoying.
But again, also, she's playing this, and it's a trope, right? Like she's just this hapless girlfriend, and like they're hooking up or whatever, and she's like, no, I don't want to have sex, and he's like, well, you never want to have sex. And
yeah, that wouldn't fly well right now, would it?
No, there was a lot of stuff in here where she was like, and he stops paying attention to her, I think, and she's like, okay, we can have sex now if you want. And I'm like, girl, no, get some self-respect.
Have some agency, person.
But like that, I had to like separate that, because that's just how relationships are portrayed in older movies, and it is what it is. But oh, and Ed, couldn't stand Ed. However, I liked the turn that he took.
Ed's such a wild character because, like, I can't remember the actor, Stephen Joffreys. He's like, you know, another close to 30-something actor playing a teenager in this. But, like, he was kind of your quintessential punk rock new wave nerd in a way. And so, like, a lot of people kind of knew guys like Ed that were super nerdy, super into D&D, and, you know, maybe did have a volume or 5 on how to kill vampires because that's what they were into. So yeah, but his turn was interesting. Billy Cole, what did you think of the Groundskeeper?
I am not afraid to admit I didn't really pay attention to him when he was on screen.
Yeah.
Just a looming presence.
There's an interesting thing about vampirism is that it's a stand-in in storytelling for lost innocence or for corruption of virtue. It could be a virginity parable. It could be any number of other things. And in this movie, I was trying to find what was the thinly veiled thing that the filmmaker was maybe trying to address that the vampire represented. And I think it might have been homophobia.
I can see that.
I'm not sure because I'm not sure how subtle Tom Holland is as a writer or director because he did both. But Jerry has a very what would be considered gay-coded relationship with his housekeeper. And his relationship with Ed seems, well, it's always predatory. I mean, that's just the thing, right? But
I mean, maybe it's just me having been surrounded by vampire IP for my whole life.
Right.
I view vampires as just seductive 100% of the time. It doesn't matter what gender you are.
It's like Laszlo.
You're going to be seduced.
Right.
And that's just I mean, if I were to view it with 1985 eyes, I would be like, I guess I could see it being pretty scandalous.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't see it that way when I first saw it. I just thought it was a cool horror movie, and I watched it with my dad a lot because he thought it was cool because it reminded him of the vampire movies when he was a kid. And so, like, it was perfect. It was a horror movie we both liked. But we didn't, I don't think I picked up on that potential aspect of it. But I think it was, maybe I was looking for something that wasn't there. And I'm not sure about Tom Holland. I don't know what his background is, but it did seem like perhaps he was trying to send a message out there that, you know, that we villainize or monsterize things. I may also be looking way too much into this, but practical effects in this movie.
Let's talk about them. They were insane.
85, no digital effects.
I felt the way I felt when I was watching Tremors for the first time. Like, wow, this is incredible practical makeup.
Do you ever see the American Werewolf in London from like 1980?
No.
Okay, there's a werewolf transformation in there that is just slightly better than the werewolf transformation in this.
The werewolf transformation in this caught me so off guard. Like I said, I was kind of distracted when I was watching the movie, but the part where Peter Vincent stabs the wolf and they keep showing the impaled wolf, I was like, can you stop, please?
The sound design in that scene is off the charts because the wolf is making this sound while it's crawling away. And they keep cutting between makeup applications. Like but it's so well done because it's like 4 minutes of 1946 through 1985 Face Actor of the Year nominee Roddy McDowall just making every terrified, sad, horrified, sympathetic look that you can make while this Yeah, well, this werewolf de-transforms.
You know how when a butterfly makes its cocoon, or a caterpillar makes a cocoon, it gets in the cocoon, it turns into a big blob of mush, and then it becomes a butterfly. That's what I felt like this werewolf transformation was like. Like first he had to become mush, and then he could go back to human.
Yeah, so good. And then when Billy gets shot and killed and comes back as a zombie or a revenant of some sort, and they do a melt with him, and those gel melts that you see in the 80s are just mind-boggling, because they had to make like a full body cast of this dude.
Yeah.
And then hit it with hot air or something to make the gel melt, and it's just, I don't want to say chef's kiss because I don't want to think about food when I think about that scene. You had vampire bats. You had Amy's transformation where she had the ear-to-ear jagged teeth mouth.
Yeah, that was insane. The Amy transformation where she got hot, you know.
Or her hair grew a foot.
And then her hair grew a foot. She went She-Hulk. And then with the resolution when like she's back to normal or whatever, and she goes back to looking like regular Amy, I was like, oh.
Well, you know, it's the power, the seductive power of vampirism.
That's another, like I would take immortality in a heartbeat, right? I would probably, if somebody offered to let me be a vampire, I'd probably take it.
I remember being a teenager and saying yes, and they were like, would you prey on the innocent? And I was like, hell no, I'd go to prisons. But then I started finding out about the prison industrial complex and realized, problematic.
Well, that's why I've thought about it too. I'm like, maybe I'll just go Dexter and like only get bad guys. But then what if their blood tastes bad because of all the drugs and the anger and the rage? And so that's why you like free. I mean, you're a vegetarian, but free range chicken just tastes so much better. Like happy cows taste way better.
Right. Well, no, happiness always makes for a more palatable meal. So that's
so
how I feel about my broccoli.
I don't know that I'd be maybe rich people, because rich people, like they would be like veal, right? Because like they have no troubles in the world.
They eat well.
They eat well.
Well marbled. I feel like I might get in trouble for where I'm going, so I'm not going to go there.
What, you're rich? I'll say it.
No, they're people too, Rebecca.
No, they're not.
Anyway, so Tom Holland went on to make a little movie called Child's Play, also with Chris Sarandon.
Oh, is that him?
Yes. So he's rather influential. What bothers me about this movie is that it's called a cult classic because it did bomb in theaters, and it found its second life on late night cable.
Why does that bother you?
Because I want it to be popular, just like everything else that I love.
I mean, it's popular now-ish, right?
I think so. I think people look back on it fondly. So, but you ended up enjoying it more than you thought you would.
Yeah. I had seen the remake, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. But I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
It's an interesting thing because I think it does play with some immortal themes, for lack of a better word. So we flash forward to 2011. We have a remake, and Tom Holland actually still has writer's credit on this because they actually did a pretty good adaptation of his original screenplay.
So this is what I made sure to make a note of this. I think why this movie slaps so hard and why I enjoyed it so very much is because you have screenwriter Marty Noxon, who is known for probably most of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
She wrote 22 episodes in her entirety, and my favorite, Buffy versus Dracula, one of my favorite episodes on that show, also because it plays with old 1950s monster movie tropes.
Yeah, and I think she has adapted previous things before. I couldn't name them without looking it up, but I think that's why the screen, like, it feels Joss Whedon-y in a way that Joss Whedon isn't involved, if that makes sense.
The dialogue is so crisp. There's a scene where Amy...
It's quippy. Yeah.
Where there's a scene where Amy, who is played much better in this movie by somebody... Imogen Poots. With accent and all, or lack of accent in this case, because of acting... But yeah, there's a scene where she goes to check in on Charlie. Same thing. She's being ignored because Charlie's become obsessed with a vampire. Where she's like, "What are you looking at?" And he's like, "Porn." And, and it's just like, it's just so perfect how they handled that. And the setup for this, I also think is fantastic because they completely changed the character of Jerry without changing anything about the character of Jerry, right? He's still a predator. He's still Colin Farrell's so good in
Jerry,
this.
Jerry to me is this. He's kind of the same as he is in the original movie. But Colin Farrell, A+, perfect casting. Get you Colin Farrell, because he knows when to be very serious and he knows when to be very silly and he knows when to mix the two. And he's just good looking, right? The man looks like he could be a vampire.
Yeah, whereas Chris Sarandon, actually very good looking for the 80s. It's kind of like when you look back at Clark Gable movies in the 50s and you go, I don't know what people saw in Clark Gable. Yeah. But then you go back and talk to people that were around and like, oh, well, yeah, he was very much what a man was supposed to be during that period of time. So Chris Sarandon, I think, had the same thing. And then you get Colin Farrell in this. Originally, the part was going to go to Heath Ledger, but he had to go and die. So, yeah. So, not to bring a bummer on it.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna bring up bummers, Anton Yelchin, who he's incredible. I think he's incredible in everything he does, especially horror. I really like him in horror. I don't know if you've seen Green Room.
I have not seen Green Room.
Oh,
there's
is he in that one? Am I making up things?
I'm not sure. They do a thing with this movie that I was so happy with, in that it doesn't go beat for beat in any way, shape, or form. They set it. It's like it's actually making
its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's commentary about urban sprawl. There's commentary about bullying. There's commentary about phonyism. There's commentary. I love the fact that like one of my favorite vampire movies was that 28 Days of Night or 30 Days of Night. It's
30 Days of Night.
30 Days of Night, where the vampires are like, oh, cool, the sun doesn't set here. And that's awesome. So with this, Jerry's cover is that he's a night contractor. He works nights on the Strip. Everybody works nights on the Strip. Perfect cover. And people are disappearing. And there's some really, really good stuff in that. And what I was most shocked with was the change in Ed with Christopher Mintz-Platz. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. What happened to him? Career-wise, did he have
career-wise? He when did Kick-Ass come out? He most recently that I'm aware of was in Promising Young Woman.
Okay, so that's fairly recent then.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say my absolute most favorite part of this is what they have decided to do with Peter Vincent and make him a Chris Angel type.
Well, who's gonna know a horror movie host in this day and age?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, Chris Angel bit, and Tennant is so good in this, and
because he's slinky.
He's slinky. He's wiggly. He looks like that inflatable wacky wiggler. That's
yeah. He's slinky and he's eyeliner.
And fake. and so
fake. I like seeing David Tennant in roles like this. Yeah.
I was reading up on some behind the scenes stuff, and the prop master actually made like a good chunk of the old ancient props have Gallifreyan writing on them.
Oh,
because they just wanted to have fun because they were Doctor Who fans, and he was my favorite new Doctor, so it's awesome seeing him in new roles. And he's great. I mean, I like Matt Smith too. He's fun, but
but this movie is fun too. Like, it's so fun. Like there was
unexpected things.
Unexpected things. One unexpected thing. Toni Collette. I forgot Toni Collette was in this. And I love her a lot. But
she's so good.
There's
she's a bit of an ass kicker, which you don't
see the mom doing that.
No, especially at a crossroads with a real estate sign.
That killed me. I totally forgot about that, and when she stabbed him with the real estate sign, it's like commentary.
That's right after he killed Chris Sarandon at the crossroads. Yeah, so sad to see Jerry kill Jerry.
And also, I really love how they keep pointing out that Jerry's not really a vampire name.
No. Which is, I think, what's so great about the premise in the first place, because like in the mid 80s we were dealing with yuppieism, right? We were dealing with the yuppies, and the yuppies were coming in with their Izods and their Porsches and their upwardly mobile mentality, and Jerry Dandridge is a yuppie in the original, and in this he's like he's like the ultimate Chad, right? He's just
Well,
so obnoxiously sexist.
Ed even mentions it too when he doesn't break in, but when he comes in as the delivery guy to Peter Vincent's penthouse or whatever, he mentions like texting Jerry and about how he has modernized or something, and just pointing that out, because you don't really think about it, because vampires are going to have to grow and they're going to have to adapt with modern times, right? You don't ever really think about it. Yeah, you got time. You got nothing but time to learn.
Yeah, and there's interesting ways to go about that, because like what we do in the shadows, which to me is the best vampire thing ever made, period. Those vampires just kind of are like the elves in Tolkien, where they live forever and they hardly adapt with time at all.
Right.
Whereas I like the idea of a progressive vampire. So he's still all shark. He's 100% shark, but he's using modern technology. His fake closet full of feeding rooms was terrifying, and I loved the little twist with the neighbor when Charlie gets her outside.
Yeah, just a real smack in the face. That'll show you for trying to help.
Yeah. So I think the reason why I wanted to talk about these movies is because we do a lot of remakes. We see a lot of remakes. We see a lot of movies being rehashed. And sometimes they're done well. Sometimes they're updated, modernized, what have you. And in this case, I think what they did was brilliant. It was not only a loving, very loving remake, it was a very competent and extraordinarily well-made remake. Like, it doesn't take anything away from the original, but it adds so much to itself.
It evolves the story to match 2011. I will say a negative point to the new one is there's no practical makeup like there is in the first one,
right?
Which I understand why.
Sure.
But I thought the practical makeup in the first one was just so cool.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, like, in 15 years when the next remake of Fright Night happens, if that's the route they'll go. Because I think, Tom Savini's still out there and still doing fantastic practical effects. You think about the practical vampire effects from Dusk Till Dawn, right? Like, those guys could have afforded anything, and they went with practical. And I think practical just works with vampires so very well. So I recommend both of these movies. I actually recommend them as a viewing party because they're different. It's not.
That's what I did. I would recommend it too. I watched the 85 one, and then immediately after I started the 2011 one, and I quite enjoyed it because I like to compare things. I like to compare media. So it was really cool to like have the first one fresh in my mind when I was watching the remake.
Yeah, and I think if you want to just watch something refreshing, they're both. They're kind of hard to find. I believe I own them both, so it was easy for me to find. But
I rented on YouTube the 85 one, but the 2011 one is on Amazon.
Tom Holland's sitting there going, "Wow, I made $6 this week. What's going on with that?"
As he goes on to star in some Spider-Man movies.
Here's a couple fun ones though. So William Ragsdale, who played Charlie in the original, went on both of the teen leads, so-called teen leads in this, went on to Fox megastardom. So William Ragsdale was the lead in a show called Herman's Head, which is what really only got us the guy who played Superman in the Superman animated series. That's really like the only thing that no,
this is some
wasn't.
Obscure stuff you're chatting
I'm sorry. Wrong Warner Brothers thing. Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman from Batman the Animated Series, was a doctor in Herman's Head. But anyway, Herman's Head, it was like they would show his head and he'd start thinking, and then they'd go into his head where different actors, kind of like that Pixar movie, would start interacting with each other because they were his thought process. So, and then, of course, you had Amanda Bierce playing the annoying neighbor on Married with Children. And then, of course, Roddy McDowell, Caesar from Planet of the Apes.
Oh.
That's what I know him from when I was a kid. I was a huge Planet of the Apes fan. When I found out he wasn't really a chimpanzee, I was kind of scared and sad.
Oh, what was this thing? There's this Oh, I wish I could remember. This is great to watch and listen to. But somebody's talking about that Planet of the Apes movie, and they're like, "Wow, I can't believe they really taught those monkeys to ride those horses."
They did. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because it's as real as your heart allows it to be.
Oh,
so,
well.
All right, you're going on a field trip. You're going to go see a scary movie.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We got some situation stuff at our house where hopefully I'm going to go see a spooky movie.
Just moved out of that situation in my house, so best of luck to you.
I have tickets to see Barbarian. I'm so excited because everything I have read about this movie everybody has said, don't read anything about it. Go in blind. Go in with an audience.
Nice.
And so I found a trailer, and all the comments on the trailer said, you're okay to watch this. It doesn't spoil anything. And so I was like, okay, dope. And the thing I am quite excited about this movie. I don't know if you've ever watched any sketch comedy from The Whitest Kid You Know.
Yes.
Zach Kreger, I think is his name, Zach Kreger. He was the one, if you remember the sketch with the gallon of PCP. He has the gallon of PCP. But he made this movie. So this is another comedian turned horror maker. So I'm really excited because all of the reviews I have seen, I haven't read like detailed reviews, but they say you will be surprised. So I'm expecting this to get laughs as well as being scary. So
because that's the best kind.
I know.
Take the tension off with a little bit of humor, and it makes it
be
perfect.
self-aware. Like it's okay to be self-aware. So I fingers crossed I get to see it.
So if all works out, hopefully we'll have Rebecca's review of this next week for Spooky Time Club. If not, we'll have something else.
We'll figure it out.
All right. I'm Lee. That's
I'm Rebecca.
So one of these days I'm going to stop pointing
What
over
are
there.
directions?
That's the other room, but that's Rebecca. So thanks for tuning in to Spooky Time Club. If you like it, please give it a like and subscribe, and tune in to our live stream Saturdays 11:30 a.m. Mountain Time, where we talk about stuff that isn't quite so horrifying.
And don't pick up the phone.
Don't. Where's the call coming from?
Inside the grief.
I hate that. It's the worst kind. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Writing.